Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Russ Jones.
And Brad Kennan.
We are wide open.
And wait, you didn't let me finish.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And Todd Kennan.
And Todd Kennan.
And Todd Kennan.
He is the next generation of Bigfooters.
So you got a special co-host with you
I got a special co-host with me today.
Well, the three of us are wide open.
Absolutely.
How are you today?
I am good. I'm very good, even though the weather's not that great, but I'm good.
Okay. You know, I'm feeling like a champion today. I'm for the audience. I'm a little red faced. Look at Brad pulling up with the gun show there, and because Brad texted me about 20 minutes ago, and I was on Stairmaster trying to get 100 floors in, and he's like, "Hey, can we do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, give me a second." So I jumped off there, and so I sponge sweat the crap off me, and here we are.
Were you at the Purple Gym?
I was. I take a class several times a week from this guy that has his own gym, kind of a private thing. And then, but I do some catch-up workouts with cardio over at Planet Fitness. And I was just getting an extra cardio workout in. You got to be able to climb those hills, man.
I know. I probably should start doing that. I do treadmill on like a 6.5 incline.
Yeah.
For like 15 to 20 minutes. Maybe I should start doing stairs more.
Let me tell you about Stairmaster, man. You cannot cheat. I mean, people can lay on it, but if you are just doing it where you're just putting your hands on it, you're not leaning on it. I always get patients to do 100 floors. I'm like, I don't care how long it takes you to do it. Just get me 100 floors and you'll be a sweaty mess. I did it today. It took me 20 minutes and 15 seconds to get 100 floors. So there's your goal to shoot for.
There's no way I would ever.
Well, eventually, maybe, you could
maybe
you could do that.
Right. Exactly. Not right now. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, here we are. One thing I wanted to mention before we get going, I posted it on the West Virginia Bigfoot page today. I was kind of surprised someone had reached out and told me that that documentary I did with the small town monsters, it's called The Hunters Become the Hunted.
Okay.
And it's about West Virginia and what I do here. It's been out 2 weeks and has 311,000 views in 2 weeks.
That's pretty good.
Has 6,000 comments.
Wow.
Of course, you and I don't read comments, so I just saw the number and that's all I know. I mean, I don't really want to go in there and have some zipperhead tell me I'm a zipperhead.
Right. So hopefully some of that will translate over to here.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I will. Now that you said, I'll go over somewhere in the comments at the end or whatever and tell people that they can find us over here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we have a very special episode tonight, don't we?
Yeah, we really do. We've been planning this one for a while.
Right. So we had a guest, and that guest, I think, had a child. So they were in the hospital with their child.
Wait a second. A male had a child? I mean, is that possible now?
We're not touching that, Russ. We don't want our third strike.
We don't want a third strike from YouTube.
No, we do not. So his wife, partner, girlfriend, I don't know what it was, had a child. Yeah. So they could not be with us.
Okay.
So you have wanted to do a question and answer for a while.
Yes.
And I don't know. We're each going to ask. We each got 5 questions.
Yeah.
That means 10 questions, which is 50 minutes.
Okay.
Which I have no idea if we could actually talk for 5 minutes per question.
No.
That might be hard for us.
We'll see. I mean, some of the questions are ones that listeners
see the sarcasm in my face.
Yes.
Because I know you can talk for more than 5 minutes on a question.
Yes. On Bigfoot. I mean, probably not on anything else except for maybe vitamins, working out, farm stuff. But other than that, I'm good. If I talked about relationships, it would be 6 seconds.
High State football.
High State football. Yeah. You and I could talk a lot about that.
So the reason I have the special co-host with me tonight is he's staying the night.
Yeah. Wow, that's nice.
What are we doing tomorrow?
Going to a Cincinnati Reds game.
Ooh, who the Reds play tomorrow?
They're playing the Colorado Rockies.
Okay, that'll be fun.
So I looked online. This is the first time I've ever gotten a discount for my age.
Wow. Did you accept the discount?
Abso-freaking-lutely.
Okay.
It was senior day at the ballpark. 50 and over. Half price tickets.
Can't beat that.
No. So we're like 10 rows off the field behind the first base, behind the Reds dugout.
Are you excited, Todd?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. I'd be excited too. I think it'd be pretty cool. Is hopefully the rain or weather will hold for you.
Yeah, we're hoping. We're hoping.
That's cool. Is it just you two guys going, or who else is going?
Just us two.
That's nice.
It is.
Have some popcorn, eat a hot dog.
Well, Todd thinks this was on purpose, but it was not. I made a mistake when I ordered the tickets, and there was two choices: parking right at the garage underneath the stadium, or all you can eat food. And I swear that I picked the parking underneath the garage because I didn't want to have to walk. Mm-hmm. And somehow I got all you can eat food.
Well, that's pretty exciting. Is that where you go down underneath or whatever?
No. It's like a couple concession stands you have to order it at. But it's hot dogs and popcorn and pop and
right
for whatever. So I'm like, I probably saved a couple bucks. Well, we're not going to eat that much food. So,
well, your grandson, man, he'll remember this his whole life.
Right. I wish I would have got the parking though. So we'll figure
it out. Hey, let me say one thing before we move on. I mean, the viewers that are watching on YouTube saw you stick your arm up there with your big muscle in it. And, I want to tell everybody, Brad has this last 15 years here seriously committed to his health, especially this last 5 years.
Yeah.
And really has changed his body and his muscle structure. And, he's a pretty fit dude. So,
well, I appreciate
kudos for that.
I appreciate that, man. I've been trying. So,
yeah, you have. And it shows. I mean, it's not easy to do as we age. So, I'm proud of you.
What did you ask Grandma the last time you stayed the night with me about the cookies?
Sugar cookies?
No, he asked why Grandpa doesn't have cookies anymore in the cupboard, because when he would spend the night, we would have cookies. Mm-hmm. Well, I just don't have cookies at the house anymore.
Because you'd eat them. So
I would eat them.
Smart.
So I just don't do it. So he was wondering why there was no cookies in the house. I'm like, well, because they're bad for you. Right. You're not supposed to eat cookies. That's why.
And for the viewers that are listening to us, Brad has his oldest grandson on here. He's really smiling a lot today. So, maybe whenever we're having a smiling issue, we should bring Todd on and see, if we can get more smiles out of him.
Well, I tell you what, I was on the Bigfoot influencers, last week or whatever.
Okay.
So I made it a point to smile.
Okay.
And it was very fun. And I don't do as many podcasts as you do, because I know you do like 100 of them. And that's like my second or third one I've ever done, not on this show. So it was enjoyable. And I did try to smile so that I did not get made fun of.
So people can drop over to the Bigfoot influencers and hear you on there.
Yep.
Our friends Tim and Dana.
Yep. All I did was I had stories about the area that I'm in and reports I've taken. And I tell you what, the hour went by pretty quick.
Oh, good. Did Dana tell you that you were an elitist? Because I know the last time we were all together, she said that you were an elitist.
No, she did not. I wish I could send her some information. Because the new gun statistics have come out. And if you take Los Angeles, Chicago, like New Orleans, Houston, and Baltimore or something out of the equation, out of 193 countries in the world, the United States would be 189th in gun deaths.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. And that they've also understood, or they've actually realized, that the Arctic ice has increased by hundreds of kilometers over the last 5 to 10 years. And the scientists have no idea why.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think that, the people that believe what they believe are going to believe what they're going to believe.
Absolutely.
Regardless.
Absolutely. So it is what it is.
Nature of the beast, I guess.
Absolutely. So you want to get this going?
Let's roll.
So
talk Bigfoot.
Okay.
You want to ask or receive?
I'm going to ask first.
Okay.
You've had a couple experiences from being a child, when you were younger to recently.
Yes.
What would you do differently with your encounters? If you could do it completely different right now, hindsight is 2020. From the time when you were a kid to the time, whatever.
Yeah.
What would you do different?
When I had my first couple of encounters, I was a young man, a teenager, but I mean, not the normal one, because, I had already killed all the different animals and trapped and ran dogs and all that other stuff since I was very young. But so I was already, a woodsman, so to speak, at that age. and I didn't know that there was such a thing as Bigfoot, and I really didn't have any idea what I was dealing with. And I think that's why it has ate at me my whole life, and I've never been able to let it go, because of that. But I can tell you, as time has went on, two mistakes I made for sure is I ambulance chased too much. I would get a report and I would run after that report. I would go and look around, and of course there's just nothing to be found ever.
Right.
And the other thing that I made a mistake doing was covering too broad of area. I spent probably a couple years where literally almost every single weekend I was by myself in some remote location, either just sleeping out in the woods or sleeping in my car or truck, whatever I was doing. And I covered a lot of ground. I had some experiences, but I didn't get to know any one area as well as I could have if I would have changed it like I do now and concentrate on the same areas repetitiously.
Now, your first experience when that squatch or that supposed Bigfoot came down to that pond when you were fishing with your uncle or grandfather or whoever, uncle. Would you have acted differently?
I remember being
if you look back, would you have thought, okay, I know that's a squatch now?
Oh, I see what you're saying. With my knowledge now.
Correct. Would you have gone after it? Would you have stood your ground? What would you have done?
Hopefully, like nowadays, we all have our cameras, and I would have heard something coming, and I would have been had the foresight to pull out my camera and get it ready to go. I wonder, because back then I thought it was a deer coming down, and I wonder if even now I would have pulled it out just thinking it was probably a deer coming down. I hope that I've trained myself well enough that I would have done that. I mean, I would have liked to have had the last 15 years that I've been really active doing this over again. I think I could have been a lot more successful. I think that in the last couple years that I've gotten much closer. If you remember in the one book, I don't remember which one, I talk about the Hewkin-Sullivan rule, which is, there were two biologists. I think that they were in Oregon, if I remember, but it might have been Washington State. Yeah, 200 hours. They said, these biologists had a couple sightings, and they meticulously charted their time in the woods. And they were like, if you spend each hour in the woods, you're meticulously walking, paying attention to what you're doing, and so forth and so on, that it takes about 200 hours to have some form of Bigfoot encounter, whether it's like you find poop, a track, a brief sighting, or whatever, or hear a noise, or whatever it happens to be. And I found that because I kept all my notes, that 200 hours was very close to what I believed was correct. But then when I cut the area down where I was in, I found out that it was about half that.
Really?
Yeah, about half that.
Okay.
So now it's a matter of each year you're adding more reports, more things to your calendar, having a better idea. Not that, because where they're at a lot of times in this one particular time of the year that you can go in and find them. Because, right now in Southern Ohio and West Virginia, you can't really see very good. It's thick.
Right.
The forests are healthy.
So I was having a discussion with a friend of mine over lunch maybe a week or two ago. He's a programmer. So he's a high-end, architecture, whatever, blah, blah. He's been building some AI stuff. And I said, I have this database with like 50,000 Bigfoot reports in it. What could you do with AI with this? And he said,
I never thought of that.
He said, he said, this would be a great case study because it's very possible I could build a predictive model with AI. And I thought, man, that'd be kind of interesting.
Yeah. Probably that one guy that does the Bigfoot mapping project. I imagine he would probably share his information. I doubt that Matt Moneymaker from the BFRO would share his 75,000 reports.
Right. Maybe, it's something, it might be a pet project that I can get my buddy to kind of jump in on. And he's my buddy that got bluff charge with me.
Okay.
Back in the day. And he's still, he's a high-end consultant in the tech world. So, and he's building some AI stuff using ChatGPT or whatever it is. And he's like, that would be a very, very interesting case study.
Some things are coming, right? You had that big university study this year doing the DNA stuff.
Yeah.
AI is out there. I think that there's some things that we don't foresee that are probably coming to fruition that might help the race to prove Bigfoot's existence,
Absolutely.
so to speak.
Absolutely.
Okay, here's my question for you.
Go ahead.
Is Bigfoot dangerous?
I say yes.
Okay.
And here's my reason. Number one, David Paulides, missing 411, all his stories.
Yes.
Number two is if we look at, I keep going back to the Netflix series, Chimp Empire.
Yeah.
So here's this thing of chimps. I think there was 120 chimps in or something of that sort. Any organization, anything that you do, you're going to have outliers that aren't like everything else. So you could get 10 good dogs and have one bad one.
Yeah, I can see that.
You could get 10 good chimpanzees, one bad one. You could get, they're human. I mean, humans. Look how many great humans there are. And then you have people that literally are serial killers.
Yeah.
I mean, and what made them that way? I don't know.
Yeah.
Was it traumatic? Was it this? Was it that? Was it outside forces? Or were they born that way? And some people, I do believe in this world, are born that way. They're born evil.
Right.
And I believe, I think that the Indians, I think their belief was that the redder the eyes, the more evil the Bigfoot was.
I remember hearing something about one time. I mean, I'm sure if I heard it, you heard it because we're around each other so much or whatever, but it was like, it had something to do with the age too. Like the color of the eyes was indicative of the age according to Indian lore, but I can't remember. Like white was the bigger adult, and I just can't remember how it went. I just remember hearing that.
I mean, I think that you could get around some of these things, maybe juveniles that don't understand, don't know, and there's a lot of people that go missing. I go back to, there was a series on YouTube called "Is Sasquatch Eating Our Children?" and they had that one it was a 3-part series, and on the third part was David Paulides talking about that child that was abducted, theoretically abducted off the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah, that was in Tennessee, the Smoky Mountain National Park. Daniel something.
Yeah, and they met the people, and
Johnson maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, they met somebody, and like literally, they had the same last name. They met these people on top of this mountain. The young child was playing hide and go seek. Next thing you know, the kid's gone. Dad takes off down the Appalachian Trail, down the trail, looking for him. Can't find him. Don't know where the kid went. The kid wasn't that old. And this thing shows up in the paper, whatever it was, and the family contacts the FBI or whoever, the search and rescue, and said, "Hey, I saw this thing carrying this thing, a child. It looked like a child across this mountain, and I thought it was a Bigfoot carrying this child." And they kind of dismissed it, but the dad and the uncle proved that it could happen, and it was, with time and distance, it was possible. So that instance, I don't know if it's being mean or is it being curious. Was it a female that had lost its child at some point?
Mm-hmm.
You don't know. So
yeah.
I believe that, like everything, there are things that are mean out there in this world, and not everything is a Yogi the Bear and, hey, boo-boo, it's, in the woods. Like people think in Yellowstone, I see people going up to bears and bison and elk and all this stuff. And
people are crazy.
Asking to get hurt. They're asking to get killed. And it's not even, I don't even know if it's they mean to, but it's just, they're animals.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if you get between a mom squatch and its juvenile, just like you would get between a mom and a bear? Mm-hmm. That bear's going to react.
Or a crippled Bigfoot, or
absolutely
an old Bigfoot, or one that's got bumped on the head by a tree that fell during a storm. I mean, I think I can follow what you're saying with the outliers. I remember FDR, our president that did the national parks. Remember, he had that story called The Wilderness Hunter that he had in a book talking about that trapper that got killed by a Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, I had not, I think that I had not heard of David Paulides when those books came out, because I remember you asking me whether or not this was a long time ago, and you'd asked me whether or not I was carrying in the woods, and I told you I was not, because I just felt like, I was a big guy and I was carrying a stick all the time, and if you bother a big guy with a stick, it's gonna probably not be a good day for you.
Right.
And I read those books, and then I reached out to David, and he had written 2 books on Bigfoot. They were really good books, and we exchanged some emails, and I talked to him some, and now he does the Missing 411 series, which on Netflix was, 1 month was their, most watched show or whatever about people disappearing because David had found out the National Park Service wasn't keeping track of missing persons.
Sure. Yeah.
And so he's written these books across the nation and formed these hot spots where people disappear. And then
clusters. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to try, I know we've reached out to him. We're going to try to have him on here at some point and talk about, the things you need to try to avoid or whatever. But I remember at one point someone asking him, and he was saying that it was like 5% of the missing things he thought were possibly related to Bigfoot. And I don't want to hold him to that because I just can't remember if he did say that, but that's what, as I recall,
5% is a fairly good size portion.
Well, still, I mean, it means that some things are happening, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not zero.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you told me to read that and I read it, most of them I looked and I was like, most of these are medical type things that happen. Somebody had a stroke or had whatever. But I mean, there were some of them that there wasn't a good explanation for.
Right.
And certainly something had happened. So I remember one time I was sliding down this coal like scree pile where they had mined, 100 years ago. And I was without cell service, and it was fine sliding down it. But when I got to the bottom, I thought, gosh, that was a little sketchy. And I was thinking, I'm getting a little older and I don't have cell service. And, from that point on, I started carrying with me what I felt like I needed to be comfortable through the night. And that meant a gun and batteries for a headlamp and, extra batteries and a headlamp and, some type of, just fire starter. And so I had that with me all the time.
What about, have you looked at getting one of those satellite push button things that's got the insurance, $100,000 insurance policy?
Yeah, that's the Spot.
Okay.
Which I used to do that because my mother used to be bothered by the fact that no one knew where I was anytime. And I was just somewhere in West Virginia and no one knew. But it's interesting now, those of us that carry the iPhone 14s or I guess that's the newest model, we have the ability to make emergency SOS calls on our phone now, as long as you've set it up. It doesn't cost anything, but as long as it's a true emergency, they will put you in contact.
What network does it use?
It's a satellite.
Okay.
They're using a satellite.
Okay. All right. That's good.
And so you can, I didn't know that. Yeah. Another thing I think is cool, of course, in the woods, I'm using that One X app so that, you can't get lost, but, let's face it, you could fall on your butt and break your phone or whatever happens to happen. If I'm out and I think it's going to be overnight or late or something, I'm usually carrying like a lipstick charger for my phone or whatever. But now, I wear the new Apple Ultra watch, and it has a button on one side, an orange button, that when I get to the woods, I just touch it and it monitors where I am. It has 2 GPS seekers on it. And so at any time I can just push that button and it gives me a white line pointing to where I came from.
Well, that's cool.
So, you'd have to watch it because it could take you over a cliff, right? Because it's just giving you a straight line.
Right.
But I mean, nowadays, so if you have your own X app, which costs $100 a year, but you can share it with 5 people. So a lot of times families, have it for their people or friends are sharing it. And, have an Apple Ultra watch, I feel like you're in pretty good shape that way.
Yep. Okay. I got one for you.
Okay.
Who would you go squatching with, dead or alive?
Ooh.
And where would you go?
Oh gosh. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. You asked me too quickly. I actually remember that's the same person that Cliff Barrickman had said as well. Bob Titmus.
Okay.
He was out in the Pacific Northwest, and he was one of those guys, like, he was a legitimate outdoorsman, a hunter, a tracker, was very interested in Bigfoot. He cast a lot of tracks. He had sightings, but he did not like the public eye. He stayed out of the public eye. And I admire somebody like that was a legitimate, person to be in the woods with. I think that most of the people that are out there today in Bigfoot world, I don't think that there's that many of them that are really legitimately going in the woods. You know what I mean? I think that they're not very far from where they're camping or where their campfire is, and they're just kind of looking around a little bit. They're probably not real comfortable with, being out there. A lot of the Bigfooters, as we're finding out as time goes on, I mean, they're afraid of the animal.
They're afraid of the dark.
Yeah, they are. I mean, remember me talking about that article out of the Charlotte Observer talking about, historically, the people we are today has never been in the woods less than we are now. I mean, we are afraid of the dark. We're afraid of getting lost. We're afraid of snakes. We're afraid of the animals that are out there. We're afraid of other people. We are far removed from our great-grandparents that knew how to garden and to trap and, fish and know how to identify the animals and could take care of themselves. I mean, what do you say? We're like, how many days from being in trouble as a society?
9 meals.
9 meals. So half the population would be in trouble at 9 meals. They wouldn't,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my wife and I went out to eat over the weekend. We walked in, and the amount of people that are just morbidly obese is astounding. And it's just, these people are older, middle-aged, older, and just massive people. And you have to think that, don't they realize that they are killing themselves? Period. I mean, they are. I've never seen a large, older person, old person. I feel sorry for them that either they don't realize it or they don't think that they can change. Where you can change, it takes hard work. There is no magic pill. But if something were to happen, who would go and fight? Who would go and survive? What would I mean? These are the people that literally would be done in 9 meals.
It seems like that our young group or young generation is normalizing obesity too. You know what I mean? Like you will see young ladies wearing shirts that show their midriff and they're obese.
Right.
And I mean? Like it's became normal or acceptable.
And it's not. It should not be.
Yeah. Well, we've changed things too. Like it used to be that, you could get a reduction on your health insurance if you didn't smoke or if you went to the gym so many times a week or whatever it happens to be. But now it's became politically incorrect to differentiate one person from another. Even if you have one person that doesn't take meds and takes care of themselves and goes to the gym and eats right, and you have another person that does the opposite, we are rewarding that poor behavior.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, whatever. It is what it is.
All right. My turn to ask you something.
Yep.
All right. So someone charges you with going and getting Bigfoot evidence. Money is no, you can have as much money as you want. It's not an issue. How would you go about getting the Bigfoot evidence?
Did you see my questions that I was going to ask you previously?
No. Did I take one of your questions?
You took one of my questions.
My bad.
So I thought about this. So I guarantee you that couple things. We have helicopters that have absolutely mind-blowing ability for thermal, distance, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I would go helicopter. Number one, find an area, get in a helicopter.
Are you talking about like with a FLIR or something? Or
absolutely, a massive FLIR.
Okay.
Either night vision or thermal. Get in areas and, get up in the air at dusk or whenever that time
Where
is.
are you going to?
I would think, the Northwest would be very, very tough because of the canopy and the coverage on it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Oklahoma, the eastern Oklahoma area.
The Ouachitas.
Yep. I'm thinking, man, it's just such a large pond to be fishing in, but we got to find the fish somewhere.
What's wrong with Ohio? I mean,
Ohio, why not? We'll go out east. So Ohio, I think would be pretty good because you could actually get if you get up high enough, you can actually get FLIR from very far distances, especially something moving across the field, a cornfield, a bean field in the spring or in the fall after the everything's been harvested. So you have that.
Mm-hmm.
So you could latch onto that. You could lock onto that thing. They can
Okay.
do that with FLIR now.
Okay.
So you lock onto that FLIR. So now you're using so facial recognition's been around forever. Is what you could do is you could actually use programming and technology to write an application that would pick out animals that fit what you're looking for. So we're not going to pick deer. We're not going to pick cows. We're going to skip all that stuff over. And as you fly, it will lock on, alert you that it has a possible squatch, turn that FLIR, where you can see it. You could circle it high enough up so it will not see you. Then is what you do. You call in the ground troops that you have.
So what are the ground troops like? Your friends?
No, this is unlimited budgets.
Okay, yeah.
This is Blackwater.
Okay, so who do you got? Like retired Delta operators?
Absolutely, we have not retired SEALs, Delta Force, whatever that is. Guys that know the woods. They have up off-roaded vehicles, and you can direct them where you need to go. Or I would even have a little bird standing by, the little Kiowa Scouts, I think is what they're called. They call them little birds, where the dudes sit out on the ledges, on the skids, and they come in real fast. They were in Black Hawk Down.
Okay.
And everything. So you call in a little bird and let them drop those guys off right where you need to be.
Okay.
And then you go after it that way.
So are you going to shoot it? Is that what you're going to do, or what are you trying to get?
I don't know. We're tracking. You said evidence, right?
Yeah.
Well, best way to get evidence is a bullet, I guess. Right?
Okay. So you're in favor of killing a Bigfoot? I mean, some famous people have been. The wood ape guys.
I'm kind of up in the air because I believe these are sentient beings of some sort. Family groups, but I think at some point in time, in order to protect the species, you're going to have to prove their existence in a way that the government can't discredit you, and the only way to do that is with a body.
Okay, so you have a helicopter, it's got FLIR, it's got night vision, you're using AI, facial recognition.
Yep.
I mean, I know that they do have those things now where they are recognizing animals and whatnot. So as soon as it recognizes something, it moves on to the next target.
Yep.
And then you're going to have Delta Force or SEAL type people.
Absolutely.
That are going to go in and try to surround whatever it happens to be using night vision and thermal that they have on too.
Yep. So you're going to be directing them to where they need to be.
Okay.
And if they have thermal night vision, the proper trank gun.
I think you just got to kill one at that point. I mean, I don't think you're going to be able to tranquilize.
Well, I was trying to be politically correct. I was trying not to upset anybody, but why not? Or, I don't know what the odds of hitting one from a chopper is, but
I mean, if you're going to have that chopper, then you might as well, whenever you get a hotspot, have someone else to mount a bunch of drones, right? To send up a drone fleet
to just continue
with
to track
thermals,
it.
just to try to make sure it doesn't get lost. And
right, yeah, it's possible. Yeah, I mean, we got to think outside the box on this one.
Yeah, I mean,
it's unlimited money. This is Jeff Bezos money right here.
Well, I mean, we've had those people in Bigfoot world before. I mean, there's probably a lot of people who don't know. I mean, the BFRO had a benefactor that very wealthy man that if you had a hot spot, that if you sent a message explaining what it was, that if he thought it was worthy, that he would pay for a game camera for you. And at one point, the BFRO on two different occasions has bought a house where the Bigfoot were coming into that particular house. One point in Kentucky, putting a scientist in there, kind of trying to do a Jane Goodall type thing.
Right. But the scientist, from what my understanding was, it wasn't the right scientist for the location.
Yeah, she was not a very animal
Friendly
lovey-dovey person or whatever.
Right,
But
yeah.
I mean, you have to have a scientist. I don't know. I think she was an ecologist, if I remember right, but PhD ecologist. But you'd have to have somebody that, who can you grab at that time that has time to want to do a Bigfoot thing?
Well, I don't know. If you have unlimited money, there's a whole bunch.
Well, that's true too.
The list gets way longer.
That's true.
Yep. All right.
Your turn.
What is your ultimate Bigfoot experience for 30 days? If you could do anything. So starting on the 1st of July, you're going to go somewhere, you're going to do something, you're going to have some equipment, you're going to have something.
So if I was going to do an experience that didn't have that much to do with research, but I was just going to do it, I would do that thing where I probably flew out west somewhere. I'd have an RV, and for 30 days, I would visit all the big spots in Bigfoot lore and meet the people that I've developed friendships with over the year, and let them take me out to their particular spots that are so renowned, like, Mount St. Helens, the Patterson-Gimlin site, just the different places like that. If I was going to do something myself, I would probably choose a wilderness area in West Virginia, probably either Otter Creek or Cranberry Wilderness area, one of those two. That's what I'm just saying, just thinking right offhand, but I could change my mind. I would locate a place in there where there was water, and it was the most remote place that I could find. I mean, I know in, say, Cranberry, there's a place that you can go that, I mean, keep in mind, this is West Virginia. You are remote just getting to this place.
Right.
And when you get to the place, you're probably on a gravel road for miles just to get into the area. But they have places there that you can be 7 or 8 miles, from the nearest little pokey, just gravel road getting in there.
Right.
I would probably take, my best Bigfoot friends. I'd take you. I'd take Frank Ferguson. I'd take Sip. I'd take Darren Pavarnik. It'd be like, 5 or 6 of us. We would all go in there equipped with all the stuff that we needed in order and be prepared. We'd have one person in charge of this, one person in charge of that, whatever it happens to be. And we would go in with an actual plan to be in a place where humans had not been at before, trying to get evidence of the animals, and spend legitimately 30 days in there. Because Finding Bigfoot, that was one of the things with the, of course, we're good friends with the people on the show, but, later they were like, sometimes we had action and, you're on to the next place. And you just wish you could have stayed,
right.
And then Expedition Bigfoot comes out, and that's kind of what they did. They go into this place and they're staying, but they're not staying that long. You know what I mean? Like, so now you're saying, you're kind of doing the two together and saying, let's do this, but let's make it a longer period of time. And you don't have the TV crew to deal with either.
So would you go in, obviously, if somewhere doesn't get action?
Yes.
You move to the next spot. So we're talking tents.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think even a remote cabin would be maybe better. Because I think that you could make noise or do something and get them to come to that cabin, because that cabin, they're used to that cabin being there.
Yeah.
They may not be used to your tents. So I'm kind of up in the air on that point.
I mean, that's the hard thing is that, like when a BFRO or other groups do an expedition, you're basing it on where you think they will be at a certain time of the year. And as you and I have both been in places where we had an expedition and literally nothing happened. They just weren't there.
Yeah.
And
it's happened more than once.
Yeah. I mean, it's common. And so that's one of the advantages, if you know that you think they're in a certain area and you're in a place like Ohio, or I don't know if Ohio would have really enough remote places for all I'm talking about, but some of the Appalachian states certainly would, like, Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, Northern Georgia, maybe would have places where, you could get into those areas. And if there wasn't something there, you could move on to whatever. I mean, I think you had to give it like 2 days, probably, if they haven't shown up in 2 days, they're probably not coming, and you just need to skip on out of there.
Okay.
I remember Darren and I did that one time in West Virginia. Of course, I was able to get away because of seeing patients, so I could skip a couple of days in the middle of the week, and he was the fire chief, and so he could do that. And so we would commonly meet like on a Tuesday morning somewhere in a remote place, and a couple different times we would be there. And if we didn't have any action on that day, we'd just pack up and move to another location, however many miles away, 60 miles away, and do that over a period of a couple of days, until we got action. And if we didn't, we would just mark it down, don't go to this place this time of year, and blah 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 blah.
Gotcha. Okay.
My next question to you is, you've been active in Bigfoot for about 15 years or so. How has Bigfoot research changed since you started?
I remember the biggest mistake at the beginning was we always believed audio was not the holy grail. Video was, but video is so expensive. Thermal, night vision. They didn't even have thermal back then, really. It was night vision. Night vision was hard to record. And I don't know if people remembers this or have we ever talked about it. You basically had it was the night vision kind of on a stick or something, wasn't it? And you carried this thing around your neck.
Yeah.
And it was plugged into this, and you like had this hood over your body, and you're watching the camera and recording as the stick is being held or whatever it was. It was awful. And then I remember some of the best audio we got. The audio was in a tub. It was a microphone, like a directional mic. It was the recording equipment was literally in a tub that you had to carry in and out with a battery, with an inverter, with the recording equipment, all that kind of stuff. So back then it was much harder to get evidence. Whereas today, your recorders are, the size of your thumb or your finger, thermals, not anybody, but about anybody for $500 to probably $700. I think you could probably get a thermal, maybe not a great one, but you can get one. Back in the day, I remember when I bought mine, it was $2,500, and it still wasn't that great. And literally it was outdated in a year. And, so that's changed quite a bit. I like the idea of the electric bikes now.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that very much.
No, getting into places with electric bikes or electric UTVs that are much more quiet. I know that's changed a lot, but otherwise it's kind of just going in the woods. I mean, really, it's just, that's all it is. You can't find it sitting in your basement at your computer.
Doug Hychek, our boss and our friend, his really I don't know how many, he's built 20 something electric bikes or whatever. It's kind of his winter hobby. He puts them together, but he had told me that there was a lot of people in the Pacific Northwest were having Bigfoot sightings on the electric bikes. In places like West Virginia, you'll have a gated road that probably in the course of a year, maybe nobody or very few of the Forest Service employees are driving on a road. They're just usually for fire control, of which we've had very few fires, in the last many years here. And so you can get on those roads, sometimes 10 or 12 miles long. You've got a camera on the front, a camera on the back. You're traveling 30 miles an hour. You can really get things quietly. They're crossing that road. So I think that is, something that might be an up and coming thing. I know I've thought about it, but for the time being, I've got my faithful Shade, and him and I are out there walking. But maybe I'll get to a point where I won't feel like I'm, able to walk 5 miles into some place.
Well, let me know. And I know Doug was. I was looking at possibly building one, and Doug's built quite a few of them. And for maybe $1,500, he said we could build a actually pretty nice one. So, and that was a year ago. So I'm sure they've changed up by now. So.
Yeah. Another thing I think that has changed in the last 15 years is the continued general acceptance of the paranormal aspect of Bigfoot. It used not to be a thing. And I'm not saying that it's real or not real or, whatever. I'm just saying that there's definitely a lot more people that believe in it than what it used to be. It's much more widely accepted than what it was.
Yep, absolutely.
Everybody knows, I think, that you should document everything that you can document and keep it in there. But, you always look to the normal things as opposed to, once you have ruled that out, well, then I think, it's acceptable to do something else.
Right. So I had a question for you.
Okay.
But it was the question that you asked me.
Oh.
So it was the one about the
snooze you lose, bro.
Unlimited money,
yeah,
that kind of thing. So my co-host has a question for you. What's your question, Todd?
I don't really have one now.
He doesn't have a question now.
Okay.
His question earlier was, how big do you think the biggest Bigfoot is out there?
So, I think one of the things that I was hiking with somebody Sunday and was telling them that, one of the most compelling things about Bigfoot is that the number of sightings, because once again, for the people, you've heard me say this a couple times, there was nothing in North America 10 or 20,000 years ago. The Bering Land Bridge, the ice froze between Asia, Siberia, Alaska, and over to Alaska. And so that's how everything came in North America. There's some evidence that people use some boats and maybe we're along the coast, maybe a little earlier than that. But from what we're seeing, that's about the time frame. And all the animals came over. Well, most of the sightings are in that same area too, where you would expect them from whatever came over. And of course, then Bergman's rule, the scientific rule that the animals of the same species are larger the farther you get from the equator. So a deer in Panama is larger or smaller than a deer in Canada and so forth and so on. And on average, and scientists have pointed this out for probably the last 30 years, that on average, the Bigfoot tracks that have been found on average are larger the farther they go north too, which is, indicative of a true species. But you hear about 2-foot tracks, people finding these tracks, and you see them holding them. It's ridiculous. I mean, I'm not saying ridiculous like it's not true. I'm just saying they're so big that it's freaking ridiculous.
Now, do you think those are slides, or do you think that is a true track that is 2 foot?
So I noticed today, Michael Freeman, which, is Paul Freeman's son that wrote that book that I was lucky enough to help associate edit, the Freeman Bigfoot files. And his dad was that notorious forest ranger from the 70s in the Blue Mountains that got that. And I saw he had some tracks there. He was someplace for selling them. And I noticed that one of the tracks he had, the whole length of it wasn't a track. It was a slide. I don't know if he noticed that or not, but similar to one of the tracks I have up here on my wall, it's a slide. And maybe here before the end of the show, if we have a few minutes, I'll go get that track and show it. So what we're talking about. But my suspicion is that people, when they see those huge tracks, are probably seeing something that a Bigfoot track is sliding into something. I mean, generally, I think that, you get most of the reports, and, humans are not very good at predicting or guessing height and distance and that type of thing. I think they're perfectly capable of saying whether something was human or non-human, but I don't think they're very good with height and whatnot. So go ahead.
I agree with you 1000%. My last sighting I had, that road crossing, I thought this thing was probably a juvenile, 6 foot tall, blah, 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 whatever that was. It crossed the road in 3 steps. Boom, 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 done. Well, that road's 27 feet or 25 feet wide.
Yeah.
It took me 9 steps to get across it.
Crazy.
So I think this thing was much bigger than I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
Because the distance, and when you're in a road, there's really, unless there's a sign right by the road, there's nothing giving you height.
Yeah.
And you're just looking at it, making an assumption that it's probably the size of a man, because that's what our brains tell us to do. It's the size of a man, whereas really it wasn't the size of a man. I think it was much larger. So, I think that 18 to 20 inch track is probably, that northwest, Olympic Peninsula Bigfoot. That's probably a pretty good size squatch. So,
yeah, my gut is thinking that like most of them, like a big male is probably like, maybe 8 feet tall. And because they're so wide, it seems enormous because it's so much bigger than, is it possible there's things that are bigger? But I mean, you remember, what's the scientist's name that I used to exchange emails with him? when I was writing the first book, he told me that he felt sorry for me writing a book because there was such a dearth of Bigfoot evidence at the present time. Henner Fehrenbach, the PhD, he did a study estimating based on the length of foot size how large the Bigfoot would be, and he has an actual graph and stuff that if the footprint's this long, this is probably this tall or whatever.
Right.
But some of these tracks you see, I mean, they would make it just ridiculous. You know,
Yeah,
I don't believe
think
there's an animal walking around that's 15 feet tall or something.
I don't believe so either. I think it's that maybe 8 to 10 feet. That I've heard a lot of that. 4x8 sheet of plywood type deal.
Yes.
A pair of shoulder pads.
Yeah.
Helmet. So I think that 8 foot tall is probably in the wheelhouse.
Yeah. I got a question for you.
Yep.
Have you heard a Bigfoot mimic, and what is your opinion on Bigfoot mimicking?
I believe one time in Beaver Creek I heard one mimic a donkey. There was a farm on the outskirts of the park. I heard something. Some other people heard it with me. It was donkey-like, but not exactly. Sort of like I remember you and Darren had the 800-pound goose that you heard at one point in time.
Yeah, I don't even remember where we were at, but
I don't either. I do believe they do mimic. In fact, there is that recording that D.B. Dolan got the night after I had my bluff charge at Beaver Creek.
Was he a lawyer or something?
He was a music guy or something.
Okay, I can't remember.
Or something?
He's kind of dropped out of the loop here.
Yeah, I think he had something happen. I don't know what the deal was. But I do remember on that recording that night we listened to it, and it went on for 25 minutes or something, or 30 minutes, however long it was. And I remember distinctly hearing 3 Bigfoot whistling like birds at each other. So I'm not saying I am saying they're mimicking because they sound like birds. Mm-hmm. So instead of making grunts or whatever, they were whistling just like a bird. Mm-hmm. And it was very apparent that they were around the mic. It was very apparent that they were mimicking birds to communicate. So I believe that they do mimic, and things that are this close to the forest and nature, they are going to do what they have to, and to stay concealed. If they yelled at each other every time that they wanted to communicate,
yeah,
then they would be easy to find.
Yeah, it doesn't seem reasonable, does it? As our friend Monongahela says, that it seems like when they do vocalize, they're vocalizing for a reason and not just vocalizing to vocalize, because that how could one stay hidden if you were constantly vocalizing, like you pointed out, that if you're like a human, because if a human was trying to hide in the woods, one of the first things he would be trying to do would be quiet,
right? And if it needs to get its attention of a cohort across the thing, instead of yelling out, hey, you might whistle, or you might bark, or make a squirrel sound or something else to mimic what's in nature, but people will understand that that's not right the same.
Yeah.
So it is mimicry. So
I can tell you the things that freak me out the most. Of course, as you know, there is a lot of things that freak me out, but hearing the stories of the BFRO expedition guys, and that they're in their tents, and there's 3 of them sleeping in 3 tents, and one guy hears Jim when he says, yeah, and the other guy says, that wasn't me. And chicken, chick, calling people's chickens, or hearing a Bigfoot call
the dog. The dog. What was the one? It was actually recorded up in the Northwest, where a lady was, she always called her dog, and she got out of her car and was doing something, and literally she heard something call her dog. And I've heard that recording. I can't remember. I'm sure Monongahela has that, or he knows what I'm talking about.
I mean, that for some reason that totally freaks me out, about something out there calling your name, or calling, what I mean? Like if I'm in the woods and I hear something say, Shade, what I mean? Like I'm out of there.
Yeah.
Quickly.
I mean, now, is there any, I thought I'd heard read an article or heard something about there are some other species that are actually, I think some apes maybe mimicking things that are around them or doing some things.
Yeah, a lot of the higher primates are mimicking things, and ravens, which are very common across North America, are mimicking things. And I saw the other day there was a study out saying that they have the intelligence of around a 7-year-old.
That's nice.
So kids mimic all the time. It's very common for them to do that. I mean, I think that on a lot of the podcasts and Facebook and different places, you'll see people are not familiar with the sounds the animals make, in particular the coyotes and the variety of sounds they make, or foxes or owls in particular. And you'll hear people in the woods and they're like, oh, that's a Bigfoot, that's a Bigfoot, that's a Bigfoot. But I mean, I have sat, hundreds and hundreds of times turkey hunting or just been in the woods at night and have listened to owls that I can see the owl, or I'm very close to the owl, and they are making, I say, horrible sounds. Like, I mean, sometimes their sounds are very monkey-like, but I mean, they're not consistent. I mean, they just aren't very good. I remember one time my dad and I were turkey hunting, and we were listening to this turkey, and we were like, Dad's like, there is no way that's a turkey. That's got to be a person. They're making the most horrible calls I've ever heard in my life. But about 15 minutes later, here comes this turkey walking by us making these horrible sounds. It wasn't very good.
Turkey with a speech impediment.
Yeah. And I think that happens. I think that the Bigfoot people don't, we're urgent to think that something is a Bigfoot. And so I'm suspicious when people say, we hear people say they heard 600-pound birds and 600-pound frogs and things like that. And I think that they do that. I know on a couple different occasions, I have heard car doors slam when I have been in the middle of woods, where there's no roads, there's no car doors.
Right.
I've heard that beep where equipment backs up. So there's a lot of things that are out there. Yeah.
That it'd have to be around that to mimic it at some point.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So you're thinking construction sites.
Yeah.
Out in the woods, loggers. I mean, loggers have those.
Probably you're probably right. Probably loggers. The bulldozers backing up or whatever, and they heard it.
Yep.
But it's kind of interesting.
It is. So.
Well, we covered an hour.
Answered
a lot of questions. I still had one or two more, so we'll see how people like this. I know when Cliff and Bobo do their show, it's my favorite episodes when they do questions. And so maybe next time I'll solicit some from the different places we have out there and see if there's some specific ones that people want us to answer.
Absolutely. And maybe, hit us up at wideopenresearch@gmail.com with your questions, and we'll definitely get some together and maybe do this again.
Yeah. Like, subscribe. We appreciate everybody that listens to us. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me at thebigfootdoc.com.
Yep. Absolutely. Wide Open Research on Instagram. What's your Twitter handle?
Bigfoot Doc. Up to about 3,800 people. I only post Bigfoot stuff. And of course, the West Virginia Bigfoot page, I'm active on there. It's up to a couple thousand people now in 7 or 8 months. And I'm usually posting reports and whatnot. I've actually got a report I'm going to be doing in this next week on a pretty good game camera photo that's out of Southeast Ohio, the Wayne National Forest.
All right.
So I've got to talk to the witness, and maybe that'll be somebody we can have on, depending on how they do.
All right. Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you, co-host.
Yeah. Thanks, Todd, for sitting here.
He could barely, I could barely get a word in edgewise without him talking and asking questions. So,
hey, it takes a lot for someone his age to sit there and pay attention and not fall asleep. Because sometimes you and I are catching each other yawning. So
right, exactly. So he sat here an hour and was good, and he was on the show. And so next year he'll be like, I'll be able to pull up that episode 40. I do believe this is episode 41.
Wow,
episode 41.
We're rolling.
We're rolling. So
it's good to see you, my friend, and appreciate everybody.
All right, we're out.
Have a good day.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.